Hi, friends. Welcome. Welcome to our session on summer. I know that's a weird thing to be talking about in February, but alas, here we are. We are excited about getting ahead of the game. I'm Ethan. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the college essay guy if we've never met before. I spend a lot of my day thinking about how to make the college process easier. Do I want to do my background? The very short background is like I started doing this when I was in 2003. Like this was my job out of college, and I found that there was so much like awesomeness, which is to say, like I feel like this can be like a really purposeful, meaningful process if you're asking the right questions. And so part of what we're going to do today is hopefully launch some of those questions and give you some exercises to do. Before Tom introduces himself, there's a little poll in the chat. If you wouldn't mind just taking a minute to fill that out, we'd love to get to know you better. Tom, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you this morning for me in Southern California. My name is Tom Campbell. I use he, him pronouns. I'm College Essay Guys community manager. I've been working full-time with College Essay Guys since June.
So do I get a piece of paper or something? Can I have something printed out?
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
We love printouts. Yeah. I wish we could, electronically transmit them to you, but I don't think we can. So anyway, I used to work prior to College Essay Guy. I worked as a college counselor at a selective independent school in the Seattle area. So shout out to anyone who's in Seattle who graced us with this lovely weather. And prior to that, I worked in college admissions at Pomona College in Southern California for 4 years, and College of the Holy Cross, my alma mater, Bleed Purple, for 2 years. So my background does come from college admissions and college counseling. But similar to Ethan, I definitely think that this process can be, if it's done the right way, I actually think that students who do it in an intentional and meaningful way can have a head start at the level of self-reflection and self-awareness that I actually feel like I was pretty late to. I look back at my college process and there's so many like cringe moments, like not akin to the BAFTA awards, which I actually thought was amazing. The Ariana DeBose thing. If anyone doesn't know that, it's amazing. Angela Bassett did the thing. Anyway, when I was going through the college process myself, I followed so many tips and pieces of advice that now that I work in it, I'm like, who was I talking to? Where did I get this information from? So now knowing what I know, and especially after going through a Jesuit education, which is a lot about self-reflection and discernment and finding your purpose and your values and what drives you as a human being, I feel like I kind of got to that a little late. And so for students in high school who can get to that process and achieve that through the college process, I think is an amazing opportunity. So it's a lot. And it's very overwhelming, and there's lots of terminology and things that we try to simplify, but that's part of why I'm here.
Yay. Well, today we're going to talk mostly about summer. We're going to share with you 5 different ways that you can spend your summer. And based on the poll so far, which we'll reshare in the chat, if you wouldn't mind, Jasmine, just sharing that form real quick. Again, for folks who are just tuning in, what we're learning is that half of you are students, about a quarter of you are parents, and about a quarter of you are counselors. For 62% of you, this is your first CEG session, so welcome. Hi, it's nice to meet you. And it looks like, it's kind of split. So like in terms of, it looks like, 52% of you are down for a pleasant summer. More than 2/3 are like interested in engaged and meaningful or accomplished summer. And then like only a few of you are interested in a relational summer, or at least among these checkboxes. So cool. So we're going to basically walk through like how to bring more of those qualities into your life. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about self-directed learning and why we feel like having a self-directed project can be really awesome. It's not, none of the stuff that we're going to say is like, you need to do X in order to get into college, because really we're about like ease, purpose, and joy, not just for the college process, but like for your life. So part of what we're going to be talking about today is what are some things that will help bring more purpose, more meaning into your life, and, have more fun. And we're all about practical resources. So we're going to be sharing a bunch, and we're going to be, basically sharing all the links afterwards. So don't feel like you have to like memorize everything. And yeah, then we'll do like a little PSA for this. We mentioned this college admissions pass. We'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end. We've got an upcoming course coming up that we'll tell you about, and then we'll do Q&A. So thanks for being here, and let's do it. Let's jump in. I think I'm gonna let you start, and we're gonna do like slides. Can I run the slides for you?
Yeah.
Is that cool?
Oh, I would love that. That'd be amazing.
All right, awesome.
I love having someone do the clicking for me,
Do the
or
clicking.
the arrows, or
Here we go.
whatever method you want to use.
All right, here we go. Here's our flamingo. How to spend your high school summer.
I kind of wish we had peacocks on the first slide because there's many around your yard. So there are many different ways to spend your, I'm not kidding, I'm not going to read the slides. But if you don't know College Essay Guy and kind of what we're all about, the kind of tagline of College Essay Guy is ease, purpose, and joy. So we feel like that's an important mantra to remember as you think about spending your summer. And oftentimes a big question that I used to get when I worked in college admissions and still get now is what summer looks the best to colleges? What looks the most appealing? What's gonna increase my chances the most? And I think something that I would really encourage you all to think about is to reframe that question instead of asking what do colleges want the most, like ask yourself, like, what do I want the most? How do I want to be spending my time? What do I want to be feeling more connected to, feeling more called to? And I think rooting your summer in core values that you can hopefully do through our values exercise, which I don't know if we want to share that in the chat.
Oh yeah, I'll get to it in just a minute.
Oh yeah, totally, yeah. But the values exercise, if you are new to College Essay Guy, it drives so much of what we really encourage students to think about all the experiences that come along with being a high school student, but in particular, really rooting and grounding your narrative that you share with colleges about what you care about, what you value, and how that came to be. And summer can definitely be a really great way to lean into the values that you've already clarified, or to identify values that you didn't really know are something that really drives you, but you can feel really connected to based on different experiences that you may want to try. One bullet that I really want to emphasize here is that colleges do not heavily prefer one summer experience to another. As someone who used to work in selective college admissions for over 6 years, I read thousands of applications. I've seen hundreds of different summer paths and options, from students who spent their summer primarily in athletics, in training camps, really kind of bolstering their skill set in that arena, students who've worked, students who've really kind of taken on self-directed projects, which we talked a little bit about. And those definitely, I have some examples that I'd love to share towards the end of the session. But really, I want to emphasize here, not to feel pressured to really feel like you need to lean into one particular type of summer to be a successful and attractive college applicant. They really come in all shapes and sizes, and a lot of it is based on contextual factors and things that are available to you. So really, I'd say lean into and we'll give you some practical examples of things that maybe were not on your radar, or you didn't think, hey, I didn't think, a summer spent listening to podcasts and talking about that in my college application could be meaningful or interesting, but turns out it can be. So these are the 5 kind of guiding, and as you saw from the Google poll, or the Google form, if you did it earlier, these are kind of the 5 guiding areas that I would say we think are a nice way to think about, I guess, contextualizing or framing summer options. So pleasant, engaged, relational, which
I'm gonna make you remember them all now.
I was gonna say relational, I know was the one that we need to really zhuzh up and really, justice for relational, since it got.
Or define it, because it could be that folks don't exactly know what that means. So we'll explain.
Pleasant, engaged, meaningful, relational, and accomplished. So I remember when Ethan asked me about this before, my answer to the poll was, if I was to pick any of the 5 summers now, I think in my ripe age of 30, so after my multiple decades of wisdom, I would say probably that a pleasant summer is the one that I feel I want the most at this stage of my life right now. And I think, especially for those of you who are high school students, I get it, y'all are busy. You're doing the thing, like Angela Bassett, you're really making things happen. And people in the college admissions world know that. So definitely, I think there can be pressure to feel like you need to spend every waking minute super turned on, super plugged in. But I think unplugging and decompressing and relaxing is such a beautiful time to be able to do that. And of course, if you're able to safely travel to places near or far, wherever you are, that's a Titanic reference. You can really, I think, make the most of what's available to you, and to kind of get outside of your school bubble and your everyday routine. So definitely highly emphasizing just that beach day, where if you live near a body of water, whether that's a stream, a river, an ocean, a lake, the runoff, if you're in Southern California from the flood, Take out your book, have a good time just relaxing and unplugging from social media, unplugging from your phone. I think especially getting outside, getting vitamin D, getting fresh air can be a really, really great way to bring in some pleasant vibes and energy into your summer. So yeah, that's one thing I'd say about this one.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And I don't want to add too much to that. I think I just want to say the reason why we're starting with that one is I think that like it can feel a little bit like there's a lot going on and it feels like you have to do a lot of things. And we just want to normalize like chilling and not doing a lot of things, because I feel like that's good for just our mental health and also like our physical health too. So the second one I want to talk about is having an engaged summer. And I'm not going to do a slide. I'm actually going to share some links. And I think one of the first things that students ask is like, well, what do I mean by engaged summer? Like, what should I engage in? One of the things I'm a big fan of is this concept of flow. And this is from a psychologist named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, which he has a really long name that's kind of hard to pronounce. And he's got a really cool TED Talk. And basically, if you don't know what flow is, there are these different factors that go into creating what we call flow states. And it can mean, basically, some of those factors are things like things that you're challenged by that can engage you, but that aren't so challenged by that you end up giving up. So things that are like difficult, but not too difficult. Another quality is a sense of like time and space kind of change. So you probably know that there are certain, like you're probably aware that there are certain things that you do and time just like goes away and suddenly like 4 or 5 hours are gone and you're like, whoa, chances are you were in a flow state. So in the article that I linked, there are some of those other, indicators of what the flow state is. And one fun exercise that you can do is just to think for a minute about like, okay, well, what are those things that create that flow state for me? Some of you probably thought about this a lot, and some of you maybe haven't thought about this before. So mini exercise, and maybe you could share with us in the chat, what are some of those flow inducing things? For me, one of those flow inducing things is pickleball, because I spend a lot of time doing that. What creates flow for you?
What creates flow for me? I'd say music. I love to sing. I was president of my college a cappella group called Fools on the Hill.
Nice.
And I didn't really know that until I think later on in my life. And I kind of wish that I found that flow state earlier on in time. But for lots of various reasons, I was like afraid of being like really musical and, theatrical and artistic and kind of leaning into that side of myself. But once I felt comfortable leaning into that flow state and not really caring what other people thought as much about the way I spend my time or the things that give me joy and fill my cup, that's kind of really when life started to flow a lot more smoothly. Yeah.
Lovely. And it could be that you're hearing us and you're like, I don't even know what this flow state is. So here's another way of thinking about what it means to have an engaged summer. And we mentioned this values exercise. It's one we refer to a lot. So if you take a look at this list here, you'll see some different words. If you feel like it, let us know in the chat. What are some of the different qualities that for you, when you think about what you'd like to get out of this summer, what are some qualities you'd like to call into your life? And then you can ask if you want, like, okay, well, then how would I bring those values into my life? And these can, I think, help us identify what it means to be engaged. So I'll just pause for a second so you can kind of look at these. What are some qualities you'd like to bring more of into your life? Maybe list a couple. And this can help us get into that. What is that engaged summer? So I'm seeing some folks saying purpose, some folks saying laughter. I'm seeing meditation, dancing, listening to music. Lovely. Lovely. For some of you, it might be meaningful work. For some of you, I love this, nature, growth.
Yeah, that's a nice triad.
Great. And so there's obviously a follow-up question to this. It's like, okay, well, then now that I have a sense of what I want to bring into my life, what are those specific, activities that could help me bring more of that into my life? And this may be sort of obvious for some, but for others of you, you're like, oh, wow, I haven't really thought about like, what are my values? Like, what are the things that I actually want? That's my ring going off.
That's Tinkerbell.
It's Tinkerbell appearing magically. There's also, let me just offer one more exercise. We told you we were going to give you all the exercises today. One more way of figuring out what is something like, what are you interested in or what are you good at is, oh, there's my wife, is taking this, it's called a character strength survey. And it's like a 15-minute free quiz that you can take, available through viacharacter.org. And once you take this, let me show you what this thing looks like. You'll get this rad report that shows you For example, my number one strength, according to the profile, as of January 7th when I did this, was gratitude. Humor was another one. Creativity was another one. So it's for those of you who maybe struggle with or aren't sure yet, what are my values? What's really important to me? It's got a series of questions that can kind of help you figure those out. So I'll put that in the link in the chat as well. Let's see. I'll put that link in just a second. I'm navigating back to there. We go. Okay. Engaged can also mean lots of different things. So engaged doesn't necessarily have to mean like going out and like saving the world. It could mean that you're engaged from your very own home. So that could mean things like reading articles. So we've got a really cool list of long form articles. And again, if you're like, oh my gosh, too many resources, again, just chill. There's so much that we'll share these all in follow up. But one website that I really love is called longform.org. And there's like, they have their best of year. I happen to think 2020 was a really good year for their articles, for long form articles. So it could just mean like you spend the summer reading, or you get to those books that you're like, oh, I've totally been meaning to read that particular book. That would be awesome. We're also big fans of language learning. We love Duolingo. So another thing you could do potentially, you could engage with, in the sense of like learning another language. I'll share that link in the chat as well. And then it could be that you take, engage to mean just like learning in general. And you go like, you know what, I'd love to just like explore the world in a bigger way. There's a really neat spreadsheet, said no one ever.
Sandy.
Sandy, right. Sandy works with us, and Heart's spreadsheets. So here's this list of pretty much all the TED Talks as of, I think this was last updated like years ago. But if you're interested in like learning about a particular field, I'm going to turn off Tinkerbell in a second, I promise. I don't even know if y'all can hear Tinkerbell. But if you're interested in learning, for example, about, I don't know, let's see, I don't know, if you're interested in sports, if you search literally for the word sports, you're going to see 51 tags, and you'll see TED Talks, which is to say these 3 to 20-minute talks from some of the coolest, smartest people in the world, addressing things that you might be interested in. And you can go to the website, obviously TED, and search for this. But I found what I liked is that these are all tagged by different kinds of interests. So if you're interested in like, the environment, type in environment, and then boom, there are 238 different talks that are involved that involve the environment. So just in terms of, again, engagement can mean not necessarily going out. It could mean staying in and going deep.
Yeah. One of my favorite ones, actually, a favorite TED Talk that I just shared with Ethan via Slack, if he wants to share it out, is How to Use Creative Writing to Bear Witness by Sakina Hoffler. And I listened to it through the TED Talks Daily podcast. So something I used to do during the pandemic was actually something that gets me to flow state as well, is riding my bike, literally and figuratively, moving my body and feeling all these different senses, the sun on my face, the wind on my back, the open road ahead of me, and putting on my headphones and listening to amazing stories and experiences. And this TED Talk in particular was one that I thought, especially, for the college essay writing process, which we're not necessarily diving into right today, but obviously as it comes in the name, that's one that I think has so many great inspiring tidbits about how to use creative writing to bear and share your story and bear witness to what you've seen and experienced in your life. So huge fan of TED Talks, and I think that's a great way to stay engaged and plugged in. And as someone who's read, hundreds of admissions files, like students who write about kind of intellectual curiosities that they developed through self-directed learning, through stumbling upon podcasts and TED Talks and all these different sources of information, I think that that's a really great way to develop those curiosities as a high school student.
Do you want to do slides or no slides for meaningful?
Sure, I can do meaningful. Yeah, right. You can keep it up here on the screen just so you can see a few formal resources. But a meaningful summer is one that I think in the, I guess, traditional sense of the definition as we're seeing it here, based on some visual clues like the volunteering shirts and people passing out what looks to be canned goods of some sort. Meaningful can definitely mean for many students and families volunteering and service. I know many high schools have required service hours, and service is kind of generally known as like a good thing to do with your time and something that both fills your cup and helps other people. But I actually would encourage you as students to kind of go one step further with this, especially when you have more time in the summer. I'd really encourage you to think about going beyond kind of the more traditional or kind of surface level service projects that might be available within your school, within your immediate vicinity, and really thinking about issues and causes that you care about and how you can spend your time to actually enact meaningful change toward that. So what are some examples of that? So I think one area where I had a colleague who used to work at another Seattle independent school, and he was kind of alarmed, I guess, by some of the service projects that were happening at the school that were kind of more of what he called Band-Aid projects. They were only kind of really putting a Band-Aid on larger systemic and societal issues. So part of his work in kind of recalibrating and changing the culture at the high school was to really have students partner with different political offices with the issue essentially of unhoused in the Seattle area, rather than kind of working at a soup kitchen, which is great, and kind of working at those volunteer shelters, which again is a great way to spend your time. Actually, connecting and collaborating with larger stakeholders and people who can kind of tackle these issues from so many different angles and lenses. And so in collaboration with the city, they actually, the students helped to kind of map out and collect data on unhoused in different neighborhoods, and it ended up being like a huge and meaningful change, and really advocating for that particular issue that he felt really passionate about, and the students also felt passionate about as well. So I'd encourage students to think about kind of going one step further beyond surface level volunteering opportunities that are really common in the college admissions landscape. Sometimes students think more is better, and they're like, well, I spent my entire summer racking up thousands of hours doing a certain activity. That doesn't necessarily, I'd say, really, that's a great way to spend your time, and I definitely don't want to discredit that. But I think kind of taking in a self-directed vein with it can be really, really beneficial and impactful, and can really show that you're willing to have your values kind of really guide and direct, and you're thinking about issues kind of on a bigger scale. Another thing that I would say that meaningful summers, especially if volunteering is something that you're interested in, I do think getting outside the bubble of your school can be really beneficial. So I had a former student who, her volunteer opportunity was actually really in connection with mostly National Guard individuals. And so for her, she was doing great work that she felt really was filling her cup, but also she was connecting with a population that she didn't interact with on a day-to-day basis in her high school community. And it ended up being a place where she really found a lot of solidarity, a lot of connection. The individuals who were in the National Guard were very different than her and came from lots of different lived experiences and different trajectories. So I also think a meaningful summer can be a great way to, that's a good like transition to relational in a way, to really connect with people who are different than you and that you can learn a lot from. And hopefully you can also share your own experiences with them and have it be a mutual flow.
Totally. Yeah. One thing that I want to name, I'm going to is shout out GiveWell here. So GiveWell, just to give you a sense of what that organization is and means to me personally. So there was this guy named William McCaskill who essentially thought, it would be great to like figure out, in terms of the charities that give, which are the most effective charities. And he did this study, really broad study, with a guy named Toby Ord, and they developed something called Qualies, which is like for every dollar donated, how much is that improving the quality of life for somebody in the world? And what they found is that the most impactful charities aren't just like 5 times more impactful, they're like hundreds of times more impactful. And there's a really neat book that he's written, a couple different books, but Doing Good Better, that is about, and he's on some really cool podcasts, that's about basically how can we make sure that that we're being most effective with our giving. And so what GiveWell is a nonprofit that they set up that basically gives money to those organizations that are being the most effective and impactful, and they share out resources. There's an awesome website, I'll put it in the chat, called 80,000 Hours. And the idea here is that we have 80,000 working hours in our life. How can we basically be most impactful, effective in our work, in the time that we have on this planet to make a difference? So for those of you who are interested in charity work, in being effective in the good that you're doing, I totally recommend 80,000 Hours. I just put it in the chat. And I recommend their books as well. He's got one that I think that just came out really recently. Some of you asked us, what does a relational summer even mean? So by relational, the simple version, what we're talking about is like relating to others. And it's been hard to do that in person because of this whole pandemic thing. It's like, some would argue there's still some stuff happening. And we look at science and yeah, COVID is still a thing. I've got 2 friends who have COVID right now. So, but now that we're sort of starting to come out of it and like not, we're not masking today. I think it's possible to start looking at in-person opportunities. And 2 simple ways to do that. Number 1 is just to like check out what in-person opportunities are available in your area. So it could be there's a community college nearby that's offering a course and something that you're like, oh, I've kind of been curious about that. Go take a course. It could be that there's like if you live near nature, like a survival wilderness course, or like some kind of rad like first aid course, so it could be one of those things that you're like, oh yeah, I've kind of been curious about that. And it could be that it's a weekend thing, it could be a week-long thing, or it could be like, you know what, I want to invest in this like 8-week thing. So I would say, I just want to urge you to like reach out and, find out what's available nearby. A second way to do this is using the website Meetup, MEETUP. I've used this, for example, you've used Meetup too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I've used Meetup to meet folks who are interested in meditation and authentic relating, which is like a practice of connecting with others. And I've had amazing experiences of meeting friends, folks that I'm still friends with. How have you used Meetup? I'm curious.
Yeah, most of my Meetup experiences have been to try and build more queer community. So especially like LGBTQ individuals in the outdoors. I've gone to like a gaming community before as well that has a Meetup that is like one entryway for people to find out about it. So it can definitely be a really great way to connect with individuals. And I feel like for high school students, like I think back to when I was in high school and I'm like, would I realistically have done that if someone didn't encourage me to? Probably not. But kind of like I was saying before, there's so many like life states and lessons that I kind of wish I got to a little earlier. And I think that really putting yourself out there and connecting with people. So say, for example, you're interested in a really niche area that not a ton of people in your high school are into. Sometimes we all have those kind of like, some might call them like guilty pleasures, or just things that are just like different than other people around you. So one example of this actually, that it actually is a self-directed project, was a student who was from one of the Alliance charter schools in the LA area here. He was really into ants. And so he had his like own labyrinth of ant farms, and he made like a podcast about it. And I remember the teacher in the counselor in the recommendation was like, yeah, no one really listens to the podcast and really like is into what he's into, but like, we love that he's so, unashamed about it. That's something that I think like, either A, lean into your interests and kind of make a podcast. And even if there's one listener, you and the people in the college admissions room who are also kind of intrigued by your nerdy geekiness, so be it. But also Meetup is a great way to kind of feel like you can find your people, even if you have that interest like ant farming that may be a little more niche and avant-garde.
I love it. Screen again?
Sure.
Because I think I did. Let me see. Did I say all the things on my slide? We do have some other little tiny things here on our slides that I will ping. So yeah, actually we talked about these mostly. Asking questions. Y'all know about asking questions, right?
Yeah.
Accomplish. What does it mean to have an accomplished summer? I kind of talked about the first one.
So I think, especially the community college classes, I know many students have, maybe your high school has dual enrollment opportunities during the school year, but even beyond that, if you're able to think about taking a summer class, I know some of the ones that I think are the most beneficial, and we also plug Duolingo on here as well, are language learning. In particular, because many of the community colleges will have practicums and language learning opportunities where you spend the bulk of your time actually connecting with a cohort of people. Usually they also come from lots of different walks of life. So kind of, justice for relational, we're plugging relational again. I think being able to connect with people who are outside of your high school environment and learning from different lived experiences, taking a class at a community college can be a great way to do that. I think people who see that you're doing this also will see that you're really self-directed, that you're brave, that you're willing to kind of put yourself out there and connect with people that are different than you. I think that that's a great life skill to start to develop at an earlier age. And I think being able to take, if you are learning a language in high school, obviously that's great. But if you have always wanted to learn, for example, ASL, American Sign Language, I know that was a class that was available at my college that so many students were like, oh my gosh, I wish that I was able to take this earlier on. Being able to maybe take that at a community college and to have those practicums to be able to get to know each other in a more conversational and relational way. That's, I think, definitely a great way to feel accomplished with your time and feel like you're like doing the thing, you're checking boxes. That's kind of how I think of the accomplished one. There's a little check mark actually for the emoji / icon. So I do think of it kind of as like the checking boxes / like, you know, you have a to-do list, you're feeling like you're getting stuff done, you're feeling like you're on and you're charged and you're making things happen. So I guess it's kind of the biggest contrast to Pleasant, which is kind of like, and you can blend, you know, these different summer experiences. It doesn't mean that you can only commit to one summer. No, you can definitely like really adapt kind of all of these different opportunities and options and frameworks. And I think one thing that is kind of a very not traditional, but like a common understanding or I guess option for colleges that people think, oh, I have to do research and internships. That can definitely be a really great way to spend your summer. You don't have to do that to, I think, be a attractive and appealing college applicant. I really kind of want to drill this last bullet home about part-time jobs being great too. I remember when I did a session similar to this last summer. One of the parents who was on the session was like, well, my son works at Chick-fil-A and he actually recently won the kind of friendliest employee award for the month. Is that something worth, you know, sharing with colleges? Like, we didn't really think it was that big of a deal. And I was like, it absolutely is. There are so many amazing skills that come from learning on a part-time job when it comes to interacting with people, interacting with customers, being able to juggle multiple tasks at the same time, being able to also, you know, make your own money and being able to spend that the way that you want. Whether that's for yourself to have kind of your, you know, summer budget to be able to afford your, you know, wholesome ice cream trips with friends, or if you happen to be in a position where, you know, a part-time job is actually something that is really crucial to your family and providing for them. There's many students that I've read files from in the past, you know, 6-7 years, that's a reality of how they have to spend their summer. It's not something that they really have an option towards. So I think if that's a position that you're in, definitely know that those experiences are valid. They are really important to be able to share with colleges, and you do gain a lot from them. I worked, you know, every summer as a high school student at a restaurant called Friendly's, where ice cream makes the meal is the tagline. Some of you may be familiar with them. They're very commonly found throughout the Northeast. Well, they used to be until they are basically going bankrupt. Womp womp. They really had us kind of skimping towards the end as well, and I was like, gee, I wonder why. Like, we are basically halfway filling these ice cream cups,
but still friendly.
Yeah.
Still friendly.
So learned a lot from that experience, and I definitely encourage you to take on a part-time job if that is appealing to you, both for the money and for the skills and qualities that can help you develop.
Yes, Sophie, starting your own business sounds super rad. Do you recommend any resources for helping with that? Great transition. So this is what I would call sort of like, you know, what I would call in the realm of self-directed project and self-directed learning. So let me define a little bit what I mean by self-directed learning. So first of all, let me pause and say, I'm about to share some stuff with you that might be like, oh my gosh, is that what I have to do to get into college? And it is totally not what we're about to say, because we don't want this to turn into like an arms race in the sense of like, oh my gosh, my friend or my neighbor is like starting this nonprofit, and so therefore I should start 2 nonprofits. Like, that is not what we're saying. You can totally continue to do the things you're doing and get into a great school. You know, continue taking advantage of the opportunities that your school provides you. Those are all good and awesome things to do. And we're not just saying that, like, those are actually awesome things to do. So let me see. I'm gonna actually get into like I'm trying to see how much time. I want to spend like give me like 8 minutes on this. So like, you guys are like giving me time on this. The reason I think starting a self-directed project, and a self-directed project is something that you're taking, you know, autonomy, you're taking leadership on. So it might be something that you're dreaming up, like, oh, I love to do photography, so I'm going to put some photographs on a website. That would be a self-directed project. Or, oh, like, I heard about this, you know, organization down, you know, that's near me, and they're like doing cleanup. Great. That, and then what I want to do is I want to like engage my friends and like come, and we're going to do like a cleanup, and maybe we're going to do like a little fundraiser connected to it. I'm going to go around and ask folks for money. This is all very quaint, like going around and like baking cookies and stuff. But those things where you're taking initiative and you're creating a project around it, and you feel like you're the one who's driving the thing, is an example of a self-directed project, as opposed to just like, if you just like showed up for a beach cleanup day, which is good. but it's like that's being directed usually by somebody else. They're telling you when to show up. Self-directed is more, okay, you're the one who's making decisions. Usually the success is something that, or like success or failure of the project is something that you define. So that's another measure of self-directedness. And oftentimes it involves putting together a team. So some of the stuff that we'll talk about in a minute is like bringing your friends along, or, getting that faculty mentor to, to help guide you through the project. So oftentimes a self-directed project is one that you're like, managing some folks in some cases. And it's oftentimes, I would say, a self-directed project is often rooted in what is your vision for how the world could be different? I'd like, which we'll get into in defining in just a second. Some reasons to do this. Number one, you're going to learn a whole lot about yourself. It's going to be hopefully create what we like to say like a safe space for failure. That's, I think, such a cool and important part of this whole process is like finding safe and, safe ways to fail. I think you'll start to develop like what we broadly refer to as entrepreneurial skills. So entrepreneurial skills are like how to create a vision, how to create a plan, how to create some goals, how to hold yourself and others accountable. It could be that your project, and I'm putting this is kind of in parentheses, a good reason to do it could help you stand out in the college application process. But you'll notice we're listing that kind of like third and fourth down the list because we don't necessarily want to say this as being like, again, the be all end all. This is just another option. Okay, so how do you do this? We started with one of the exercises that we think can be really useful, which is like, in the spirit of connecting with what you care about, do that darn values exercise, or you can use the Strengths Finder to figure out, okay, what is it I actually care about? And then ask yourself, okay, how could I connect this thing that I care about to some problem that I'm seeing in the world? So the idea there is to start from the internal, as we've been kind of saying on this session. Start from like, okay, what do I care about? What do I think, how do I want to make a difference? And then going, okay, what in the world externally, how do I hook that up to something, a problem? Could be local, could be global. A 1-minute thought experiment you could do is just ask yourself, what's something that you'd like to be different in your world? And it could be something that you want to be different at your school. It could be something that you want to be different in your neighborhood. It could be something that you want to be different globally. It could be a huge environmental issue. So a couple examples of this, just to kind of give them briefly, is like, one student tired of seeing discarded water bottles. And so they're like, oh, let's actually create a recycling campaign in our school. A global example is a team of 20 students identified that poverty, education, and leadership are 3 areas they wanted to reduce the achievement gap. So they started a student-run tutoring group, and they worked with LEAP. LEAP is an awesome organization, Leap for Change. Lauren Callahan, if you want to look her up, we could actually share that link as well. She helped sort of, help me think through this a couple of years ago as we were kind of putting this together. But that's an example of like a big global one, is like starting a tutoring program. So step 1, connect with what you care about. Step 2, can you find a problem that connects with the stuff that you care about? Step 3, what's your vision statement? Like, what would you like to see differently in the world? So this is oftentimes something that won't necessarily change in your lifetime, but is sort of like the pie in the sky. It would be amazing if. So an example of this is like for College Essay Guy, the vision for our organization is higher education, access to higher education for any student anywhere. That's our vision. That's what we're about. That's what we're trying to bring in all of these sessions. And that's a little bit different from the mission. The mission is like, here's how we do it and who we're doing it for. Vision is like, how would you like to see the world be different? Let's see. Let's go to step 4, building a team. So once you sort of got a sense of like, all right, here's my vision, here's the thing that I want to create, building a team out. Why do this? Obviously, more folks is going to make the work easier. It's also, I think you're going to learn a lot more about collaboration, have a wider impact potentially. And I think that oftentimes, again, this is in parentheses, when you're writing about in your college applications, if you end up doing that, I think you're going to just have more to write about. I forgot to turn off Tinkerbell. I think you're just going to actually have more. It is. Let's just imagine that it's magic happening. But it can actually give you more stuff to write about, which I know seems like, but whatever. I found it to be true in working with students through this part of the process. The next step, I think, is like getting with your team. And once you've got your team together, ask yourself, okay, could we craft some kind of mission? Like, what is the thing? Even if it's like just based on a project, and getting specific with what is the mission? What is the thing that you want to do? And so it could be, for example, I'll put this in the chat. The mission of our Eco Club is to protect and improve our environment, both locally and globally. Now, you might be like, whoa, that seems really big. And so how could we find, a more specific version of that? It could be that it's more local, like something like our mission is to provide clean drinking water for the students at Westminster Academy. That's maybe your school. And so you can kind of drill these down. I still think the mission needs to be somewhat aspirational, like if folks feel excited about it and short so that you can remember what the thing is. But you don't necessarily in the mission need to get into like the hows of how you do that. I think that's like a separate goals conversation, which we'll talk about later on in the year about how to actually do that. Step 6, I would say, like, just to keep it simple for today, would just be to, take the next step. I feel like I'm quoting Frozen 2 here, but do the next thing. Like, what is the next thing that you would need to do? And
into the unknown.
Into the unknown, exactly.
Into the unknown.
And then obviously there's a phase after this that involves sort of like figuring out how do you assess how you did, and then potentially writing about it if you wanted to include this as part of your college admission application. But those are some quick fire tips. So I'm going to actually paste those into the chat in case folks were like, wait, what were all those things that they said? And let me just put those in.
I think one point that
Please go.
Step 4, the build your team step, I think is one that I really want to drill home with. Again, hashtag justice for relational. I think that sometimes there can be a pressure, especially with college, to be distinctive. And I think that there is a tension between wanting to stand out and do something that's distinct and interesting and kind of like, I did this all on my own. And I think that because of that, sometimes students feel like I don't want to necessarily have other people as involved because then I won't be the one who's standing out. I think if you're the one who's kind of leading the charge and identifying collaborators that can really help you achieve what you want to achieve, I've seen that the projects that I've read over the years that have been, I think, the most impactful and the most memorable have been those projects. So one example was I had a student a couple of years ago at Pomona who enrolled, he was really interested in the issue of algorithmic oppression, and particularly how artificial intelligence has oftentimes there are, for example, Ring cameras are more likely to profile certain faces more than others. And so he actually contacted law enforcement and tried to really work with them and their body cameras and artificial intelligence to make them less oppressive and less biased towards certain individuals based on skin color, based on other characteristics. So that's something that he really kind of collaborated. It was something that he was passionate about. He identified a cause that he cared about, but knew that he couldn't really achieve the impact that he wanted to achieve on his own. Another student that comes to mind is a student from Koreatown in Los Angeles who was really into history. And during the pandemic, he wanted to connect with people in his community when he knew that people were feeling isolated, they were feeling lonely. So he did interviews safely outside, masked, with different individuals about their family histories and kind of how they came to the US and their roots and legacy. And he chronicled those stories on a website that he made on Wix.com or Squarespace or one of those awesome build your own website tools. So again, collaborating with his community, the place that's kind of right outside his backyard, to share these stories and make sure that other people can benefit from them as well. So yeah, I definitely want to encourage that point about building relationships and kind of knowing that, like, yes, you can be distinctive and stand out and kind of people will credit you for doing the thing, but also it doesn't mean that you have to do it all in a vacuum, all on your own. You can lean on collaborators, you can lean on a team. And in fact, I think that actually says a lot about your capacity and ability to create the largest amount of impact possible, and knowing that kind of doing it in a vacuum isn't always the best way.
Yeah, some of the advice that there's a podcast that I put in the chat that Blake Bowles did. Blake Bowles is like one of the people who's known, I would say, internationally on self-directed learning. He really feels like you can quit high school and be okay, and really take charge of your learning. And he's a big fan of that. And he makes the argument for that in the podcast. So if this is something that you're interested in or interested in just like learning more about, like, check that out. But some of the things that he said really resonated for me. And one is like the notion of emailing strangers. And what I mean by this is, like, if there's a thing that you're into, I've been surprised by how willing oftentimes folks are to write back. And sometimes it could take a few emails. But if there's like a particular person who inspires you, who is doing a thing that you want to be doing, like, make specific your request. If it's like, hey, I'd love to ask you some questions, that'd be okay. And like, or I'd love to have a 10-minute conversation. Like, make specific your request when you're emailing somebody. But I think you might be surprised by how many folks are like willing to share their knowledge, share their learning with you. So I want to just like upvote emailing strangers. And I think that, this is how you could potentially find a mentor if you're interested in that. The other thing that he talks about a little bit is creating a really awesome digital paper trail. And so if you look at College Essay Guy, and things we're going to talk about in just a minute is some of our free resources. Like, I've tried to create a really awesome digital paper trail of like resources that you can find and use. And you can think about this when you're thinking about whatever you're trying to create. What are the digital pieces that could live beyond this project that folks could access and learn from, down the line? Is it a website? Is it a tool? Like, what are these things? Is it even some images, inspiring images? What are the digital artifacts of whatever this thing is that you're going to create that are going to live on beyond you and live on this, in the metaverse, as it were? Any final thoughts on self-directed projects?
Only that I think that they can be, I think a theme that I'm seeing kind of like emerge from this session is like literally frozen, like into the unknown, like leaning and kind of having the bravery to go beyond kind of the immediate and peripheral, because so many times I'll hear students be like, oh my gosh, like I'm so involved, I'm in this club and this club and this, and doing these things that are in my high school. And it's great to lean on the things that are available to you in your own vicinity. But I think it can be so much more, it can fill your cup so much more when you're kind of the one who's like really carving your own path and identifying something that you want to achieve on your own and with a team as well. And I think another note that has kind of come up for me, at least in like reflecting and doing this session, is like, if I was sitting in your shoes as a high school student and I was hearing these things, I'd be like, yeah, that's all well and good, but like, I'd rather just hang out with my friends because they're around me and I like them. So, but I think there is so much benefit from kind of like interacting with people who are outside of your own vicinity, for doing things that are outside of the immediate circle that you may be a part of. And leaning in and kind of having that bravery to try something out, I think is such a great skill to develop. And again, it's one that I wish I kind of had more of that comfort in myself, and sense of security in who I was to do that. But I was so concerned of what other people thought of me and wanting to kind of be as low profile as possible, and like kind of the quintessential adolescent, vantage point. And I'm not saying that like reject your adolescence, because I think it's actually a really important and meaningful time in your own development. But I do think that the sooner you can kind of go to the beat of your own drum and like not really care as much about what other people are thinking, and you just lean into what you're into, you can start to kind of really develop such a more meaningful and beautiful life at a much earlier time, and something that I look back and I lived with no regrets. But I do think that that's something that if I was to turn back time a few years, I would have loved to lean into that.
If I could turn back time. So that's like officially the end of our like the content that we want to share. We want to share with you a little bit more about CG and like the things that we offer and how to hang out with us for the rest of the year, if that sounds like a fun thing for you. And then let's shift into Q&A. So feel free to throw them into the chat. You can throw them in everyone, or you can throw them into directly. So one of the things that we're big on is free resources. And if you pretty much Google anything like college, there we go, better. If you Google pretty much anything like college admission related, and you add the words College Essay Guy, you'll probably find some blog post, podcast, or YouTube video. Some of you may already know this. So, we invite you to take advantage of all the free resources. Like 99% of the stuff on the website is all free stuff. And that's what we're here. That's what we're about. The other thing that we're super excited to launch, and, we have basically each year, the other things we do, we have pay what you can courses, and we've got like one-on-one support, and we've got free and paid options for all of these. So let me share with you like I think the coolest thing that we're doing right now. What you're inside what's called the College Admissions Pass. And so what the College Admissions Pass is it's essentially a year-long program that will go to the end of 2023. And what you're getting is, here's basically our calendar. This is February, how to make the most of summer. What we're talking about next, the next session we're going to do is I'm going to do just like a college application crash course, which is going to be useful for anybody, like no matter where you are, whether you're, even if you're like at the beginning of high school, because I want to just give you a sense of like, here's what colleges are looking at and looking for. And then Tom, in a couple of weeks, is going to be leading this course on highly selective colleges and universities. Now, quick side note, we don't feel like highly selective colleges are the be all end all. We really believe that you can be happy in so many different kinds of colleges and universities. Totally, like really, really, really. In fact, highly selective colleges aren't for everybody. But when we did a community survey not long ago, we found that a lot of people were like, hey, please, can you give more resources specifically on applying to highly selectives? So for the first time ever, and with lots of qualifiers, we are leading a course on highly selective colleges and universities. In April, we've got a rad workshop with one of our experts, Amanda, on how to pay for college. So there's going to be like a 1 hour, focus thing on that. And then we've got a really awesome resource that'll basically guide you through all the steps of that. We're going to do a workshop on, and these workshops, by the way, are one-off sessions like this on exploring and finding your major. One of the things we'll say in that, by the way, spoiler alert, is that you don't necessarily have to find a major. There are some colleges that really welcome students not, applying undecided. Others, you're going to want to be like more focused and when you're applying, and we'll talk about the differences there. May, we're going to talk about how do you create your standardized testing plan and like what's the right timeline for that? And then also, should you test or not? Like, how do you even know that? We're also going to talk about creating a great college list. This is something that I think it's really great for juniors to be, to begin doing and begin thinking about. You don't have to like have this identified, fully done until like, beginning of senior year, ideally. But we want to plant some seeds, even if you're in like 9th and 10th grade, just like start thinking about, okay, how could I start visiting schools to figure out what I'm looking for? Then we're going to talk about college visits. In June, during the summer, we have big courses for students on writing the personal statement and then writing your application and supplemental essays. These are 4-week courses with me that basically are by the end of your summer, my goal is for you to have your applications done for your early schools if you're applying early. There will be another session on whether you should apply early or not. Tom and someone else on our team is going to be leading one on basically lessons from current and former admission readers. How do you know like what colleges are actually looking for? In August, we've got some folks are interested in like taking their essays to the next level. So we'll do like an advanced course. And for students who are applying to the University of California schools, we're going to do a specific one on that. We're going to probably be talking about this more earlier in the year, but we're going to do specific sessions on like productivity and time management. We're going to have drop-in hours as students are doing their applications. We're going to talk about how do you prep for interviews, and not just college interviews, but like interviews that you might go into outside of the college process if you're applying for jobs. We're going to talk about scholarships and then what to do for 11th graders once you've applied. And this it's basically we've mentioned this for every grade level. You can join the first workshop for free. That's what you're doing right now. And then in terms of payment, like I'm going to just scroll down. There's like different prices for different grade. But look, if the rate doesn't work for you, we want to encourage you to apply for a pay what you can spot, because that's something that we're really big on. So check this out. So we've got what we call scholarship spots for, and you just click this here and it takes you to a Google form and you can apply for a scholarship spot. We've also got like group rates, and we've also got like friend rates. So you can like sign up with a friend if that's interesting to you. So we want to encourage anybody to join this, and we don't want money to be a barrier. So just click that scholarship spot if that's meaningful to you. Some students are like, you know what, I'd rather have more one-on-one support. Click here, and there's like, and oh, by the way, Jasmine, can we put the link in for this so that folks can see this? But schedule a chat with us if you're interested in like more close one-on-one support. We've got one-on-one support that is like really comprehensive that folks can pay for. And then we've also got something called our Match Sliders program, which is for 11th graders who are applying and they're getting ready to fill out their applications this year. And our application for that opens up in a few weeks. And essentially you can get free application support as you're going through this process. So if that's interesting, we'd love to connect with you. All right, let's shift to Q&A. What questions do you have? What if students don't know what to major in at college? What activity? Oh, let me go earlier because there might be some questions. Here we go. Okay. I'm interested in engineering, but I'm also looking for how I can connect humanities with engineering. What's your take on doing courses in areas like philosophy and trying to connect that with engineering for developing relevant solutions? This is very specific, but I kind of like this question.
I do too.
Do you want to take it to you or?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say that interdisciplinary thinking and learning is actually something that, A, I think is a great skill to develop just in its own right, but B, many colleges I think are curious and interested and compelled by students who are able to make those connections. So P, the name of the person who put in this question, I think that's a great idea and a great question, and one that I think increasingly combining disciplines is something that makes you a really successful individual in so many different industries and capacities as our world is changing so rapidly. So I think that one area that, like, I know at the Claremont colleges where I used to work, where students oftentimes were doing these types of projects, were through what was called the Hive. It was a center that really emphasized design-based thinking, which had a lot of elements of art, design, and humanities philosophy, as well as engineering principles. So I think definitely, I don't know if you're able to like find like a makerspace, is kind of like a term that is often used for these types of areas. I don't know if there's ones that are like publicly available to non-students at different colleges, or if there are options, for example, at museums in your hometown or local area. But that seems to be an area where I think there could be some potential for that. Or even just connecting with, if you are a student and there's a local college, either community college or otherwise, reaching out to departments. I know, kind of like we talked about Blake Bowles' advice about cold emailing, also cold DMing, if you like, to relate to Gen Z, like you could do that as well. But that's something that I think there was actually a student a few years ago who, this is not necessarily related to engineering and humanities, but I think it's an interesting example of reaching out to someone and having it work out for you. She was really interested in the indigenous language called Mutsun in Northern California. And she reached out to a professor, I think it was at Arizona State University, and reached out a few times as a high school student to see if she could be a virtual research assistant for his project. And he ended up having her come on board with the team, and she was a huge asset, and he wrote a letter for her and everything. So I think sometimes those cold outreaches to people who are doing interesting work could be really neat. Another podcast actually for interested in philosophy and engineering. Ooh, bless you. And practical. It's called I think it's called Overthink. I'll look it up and then send it to you via Slack, Ethan. But it's actually a podcast by a Pomona professor named Ellie something. And it's kind of all about like everyday philosophy and how it can relate to different industries and aspects of life. So that's another place where I recommend just like kind of leaning into that. And if there's any particular tidbits from these great experts in philosophy about how it relates to modern time, I think that can be another really, hopefully a good seed to plant to help you with your project.
Yes. I want to say, Priyanka, also, like I put this in the chat, but I kind of think of all majors as interdisciplinary in the sense that like you can take anything and go like, and like blow it out. And I actually think it's really good. Like it's a good mental exercise to be like, okay, how could my major potentially be interdisciplinary? Because I think that it can actually help. And I'm thinking about the college application process, help differentiate you when you're trying to be different from all the other, for example, engineers or English majors, or, fill in the blank, students applying for law or students interested in pursuing medicine. Like thinking about what are those other things that you can bring in is a great differentiator. A thing that I forgot to mention that I want to mention for parents is we've got a really rad parent community. If you're interested in just connecting more year round with us, and we do sessions regularly on all sorts of things, but they're more parent focused. And so, yeah, we invite you to join there. And I threw the link into the chat as well. Even though we're officially at time, are we cool to chill for a few more minutes? Yeah. We'll spend another like 9 or 10 minutes or so hanging out with y'all and keep going through these questions. Gopi's asking for the name of that TED Talk. Don't worry, we will share it in the follow-up. It's coming, don't worry.
They're gonna love it.
You're gonna love it. Let's see. I'm a big fan of accomplishment. Therefore, the accomplished summer speaks to me. I have a big love for learning. I'm interested in college courses over the summer. I was wondering, is it beneficial to take courses over the summer that pertain to the major you're interested in? Positive affirmation. Do you think taking courses one would take in college over the summer is better, or is taking more hobby-driven courses better? And I'm going to do like the shrug emoji because I think it depends, Sophia, on like, what are you feeling super excited about? Like, if it feels, and by the way, it doesn't have to be an either or. Like it could be that, for example, you look at what's available in courses and you're like, I'm interested in this course more than that course. and I don't know which that is, if it's more related to your major or more related to your hobby, then whichever one you don't choose, find another way to explore that over the summer. I'm not saying you need to pack in like 15 million things for your summer, but like, I think you could probably check both of those boxes in a particular way.
And if you want kind of like a low stakes, intro point to that, like I think taking courses through Masterclass or Coursera or kind of any of the MOOCs, massive online,
Yeah, totally.
something, that's the acronym. That can be a great way to kind of like test the waters with a course where you may not want to fully commit to paying the fee for it, or for committing to actual grades and assessments and whatnot. So that's a nice way to if you want to kind of like dive into some of those more hobby-based interests without kind of like fully committing, for the whole shebang. That's another thing that you can also take, vocal classes from Mariah Carey. So that's another masterclass option. Also, Christina Aguilera just released one too. So
I'd go with Mariah.
I would go.
But I'm 90s
Me too.
kid. I'm 90s kid. This is the tips you're getting from the college essay guy session.
Be more like Mariah.
Mariah greater than Christina. No, I don't mean that generally. I'm sure she's a wonderful person. There was something else here. Oh, okay. So someone is asking, after doing a self-directed project, how can I prove or show it to a college? So that's something that we wouldn't have today time to get into, but essentially oftentimes what that is, just to speak about it briefly, and there's a whole course on this, by the way, coming up in July, once the thing is already like in process or is done. But usually it's those extracurricular activity essays. So when you're applying to a particular college and they're asking, for example, what's something that's meaningful to you, or they're asking, what's an extracurricular activity that you've engaged with, it's been important to you. There are 2 different formats that we recommend for that. Specifically, you can use, well, I'm not going to get into the details right now, but there are 2 specific ways to do that. But I would say right now, just think about, well, what is the thing? Go do it, go get into it, have an amazing experience, fail, learn a lot of stuff. And then once you've got all that stuff in your brain, then let's talk in July about how you actually put that in your applications. I don't want you thinking about it too much now, because I don't want you to I don't know. I think sometimes students like too much sort of pre-planned so that they can make it for a good essay. And I'd rather you actually go have just like an interesting dynamic experience and tackle a challenge that's really engaging to you. And then let's talk in a few months about how to actually put that in your application. Also,
Che-Yi, stay tuned in March, because myself and Andy Simpson, who is our editorial director, are putting together a blog about writing about research. So if your self-directed project has a research component to it, I think the lessons that we're going to be sharing in the blog are actually relevant to all self-directed projects, not exclusively research, but it is through that lens. We're partnering with Lumiere, who actually is a provider of kind of independent research initiatives, to put that together. And there's also going to be a webinar later in the month too. But the blog is available to anyone. And once it hits the press, you'll probably find out about it on College Essay Guy's social media. So cue the link.
Stay tuned. Yeah, that's the other thing I'd say is like a great way to stay tuned, besides just Google, like in terms of what resources are good at what time, is just stay on our email list and just, I know it's like, keep checking your email, but like, we're going to be pulsing, hey, here are the things that we're offering at different times, so just, I would say like, stay tuned, and we're going to kind of be dripping it to you. We try not to give it all to you at once, because it can be a little overwhelming, but Johan's asking, I'm an 8th grader going into 9th. What should I do this summer? Too early or just right? I mean, hopefully, Johan, we've given you like broad enough categories for this and some ideas, but I don't think it's ever too early to like start learning a language or like doing some reading. So any of these things that sound interesting to you, like go do it. I think it might be hard to be like, okay, I'm going to go plan a trip that I'm going to take all my friends on. Maybe that's too much to do, but some of these things hopefully have pinged for you and you're like, oh yeah, I could totally see myself doing that, because I don't think it's too early to find out what you love and then start doing cool stuff around it. Leslie says, I keep hearing people say colleges are looking for a story, a thread that runs through your application and summer activities. So I want to say two sentences on that, and then I want to kick it over to you for that. I think sometimes a story emerges like later on in like 11th grade, but I think I wouldn't necessarily recommend that students, like especially in 9th and 10th grade, like that you start trying to construct your story too early, because I think that could be in some cases really limiting in your activity. So what I would say is, I think this is the second sentence. So what I would say is like what we started off with, which is like, go find the things you love to do, go try a bunch of stuff, have interesting, engaging experiences. And then at some point in 11th grade, usually in the summer, we can, again, we've got courses we're doing on this, but like, then we can start to look back at what are the experiences you've had and how could you then construct a story out of that. I just find that sort of going like, that, here, 8th grade, here's my path, can sometimes be like, so thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's one of those, Leslie, I think it's such a good question to ask. And it's one of those ones where I feel like, as someone who used to read files at a selective college and the admit rate was about 7%. So I was amazed when I got there and started reading that, like, I used to work at Holy Cross, which the acceptance rate was between like 35 and 40% each year. And then to transition to a place where it was 7%, I was like reading files my first year for early decision kids and was like, this kid's awesome. Like, they're president of this club and this club. And then my colleague that I was reading with was like, well, they don't meet institutional priorities and there's really nothing to move it forward. So like, we can't admit this student. And I was just like, my mind was blown, because to me, I was like, this kid's great. Like, they're involved in so many things. So I think, when you say kind of, I think the question was phrased like, if you want to scroll up just a second.
Yep.
I keep hearing that colleges want a story.
Yeah.
I would say that, and that definitely I'll touch on this in a lot more depth in the highly selective admissions course. I'd say for highly selective schools, having a thing that you're known for, like you're the beekeeper kid or you're the ant farm kid, like these kind of examples that I brought up, that I wouldn't be being genuine and transparent if I wasn't saying that those stories do make for sometimes memorable applicants. But even if you have a story that's a part of your narrative and you don't meet institutional priorities for that particular college, no matter how interesting and avant-garde your story may be or distinctive, you still may not be admitted to certain schools. There's no kind of like silver bullet, I guess I could say, when it comes to that. I do think kind of being able to articulate your narrative and your values and kind of like your story. It can kind of come from multiple sources as well. It doesn't have to be my entire world revolves around Tinkerbell, whatever it may be, right? That'd be pretty cool story. And I'd love to see like, the metaphysical engineering and philosophy that comes together with a fairy that shoots around pixie dust and makes things come alive. But I wouldn't say that just kind of latching on to the most distinctive or original or avant-garde story as like the kind of golden ticket to insert highly rejected college is the best way to live your life. I think sometimes it's totally cool to do basic normal things that fill your cup that you enjoy, and if there is some spice related to that, great, but it's not something that I'd say is a requirement by any means.
I want to acknowledge that there's a Venn diagram here. It's not an either or. Like, it's not like go do the things you love, or we just want to make sure that we're not meaning on this conversation like make getting into a highly selective school the thing that's driving your decisions. I think that having it as one of like several things can be cool. One of the things, and I put the link in the chat that we're going to talk about in the course, is like, okay, what are those things that like, what is the actual data that helps, that colleges are looking at? Like, how much do these activities matter? We're going to go through, Tom's going to go through, it's a 3-week course. Tom's going to go through like specific case studies and examples of students who were able to, in some ways, find that Venn diagram. So yes, it is possible. we want to make sure that it's, I want to acknowledge that yes, it is possible to do both. Karen's making a good point. There are too many colleges, too many different sets of priorities to plan your life to work toward what colleges want. Yes, absolutely, Karen. It's so, and also it puts us into that like impossible situation of like, I like to think of it as like trying to put on a shirt that's going to be like just the shirt that everyone likes. And it's like, you're not going to know what everybody likes.
Except this one.
Harmali is asking, is philosophy with economics a good major for me if I'm interested to work later on in the banking sector? Shrug emoji? I mean, yes, sure. If that sounds great, go for it. But also, I mean, it sounds like studying philosophy in general is a good thing to do. Studying economics seems like a good thing to do. And if you are interested in banking, studying them both sounds great.
You might also like PPE, which is philosophy, politics, and economics. There are a few schools that offer that major. So something worth looking into.
Some folks are spamming their questions here. Someone is asking, oh, wow. Let's see, will you cover applications and financial aid for international students?
We will for a little bit in the highly selective course.
Yes, we're going to cover that, and then we're going to cover it in like different workshops throughout the year. And there's also a really cool tool called actually, you know what, we'll follow up with it because I forget the exact anyway, because I also don't want to overwhelm folks.
Auxilia?
There it is. Thank you. Auxilia. This, even if it does end up overwhelming folks. The link isn't popping up for me. Okay, we'll follow up with the link on this, but there is a tool that we have, Christina, and hi, it's good to see you, that we have that is specifically for students who are applying to highly selective schools and our international students who need financial aid. We've got a tool for that
Sending
as well.
it to you
Thanks.
via Slack.
Once you apply for match letters, the application comes out in like a month. Yep. Economics. Thank you. Let's do some quick rapid fire as we end our session here. Can a counselor pick and choose? Oh, I would love, Karen, I would love for you to join the college admissions pass. Any counselors are welcome to join. We don't have them like split out for like a la carte because it's a lot of work to do. So it's sort of just like a one all, you know, get it or don't get it kind of thing. Let's see, Leighton, do you have recommendations for origami? Oh, I think I saw you got some recommendations in the chat from somebody. My high school is really pushing dual enrollment over APs, but I'm worried colleges don't view them as highly. Any insight? Go. And then we'll do that, and then we'll do one more question.
Sure, yeah. Go. I would say whatever rigor is available to you in your high school. So the two questions that typically an admissions officer is going to ask when they're reviewing your transcript and your academic, the academic part of your application is what was available to the student and what did the student leave on the table? So if you happen to go to a school where advanced placement classes, AP classes are offered, and dual enrollment, and IB classes, and maybe some other kind of self-directed rigor that your school may offer, most schools don't have kind of all of those combined, but there are a few that I've read over the years. I would not say that there is a rigid tier of preference across colleges that I'm familiar with when it comes to types of rigor. I'd say that colleges kind of view, in my experience, dual enrollment, advanced placement, and international baccalaureate or IB classes pretty equally. They kind of see them as high, more intensive than the typical college prep classes in a high school. They all are seen as kind of a step above the graduation requirements that are available to students. So I'd say as long as you're taking class, and sometimes there are certain classes that are available through dual enrollment that are not available, that are really interesting to the student, that for whatever reason, based on their own intellectual curiosities, they choose that other path based on that. So I'd say, my advice around that is sometimes students will maybe be like, oh, well, I'm really interested in this kind of community college class that isn't really a core academic subject. So they might take that in lieu of, say, a core science or a core math. In my experience, taking all 5 solid classes all 4 years, so that's English, math, social studies, a science class, and a language class, that's the one that's kind of like a little give or take. I'd say definitely the four solid courses I mentioned. If you take those all 4 years, whether that's dual enrollment, AP, IB, or your school doesn't offer any of those at all, and there's some other form of rigor that's available to you, that's what I would encourage you to think about. So yeah.
I had one question come in as a private message, and it was from a student asking, can I do the college admissions pass and also be a Match Lighter student? And the answer is yes. We want to engage with y'all, whether it's through the college admissions pass, Match Lighters, through this upcoming course. And again, with this pay what you can offer is like a real offer. So we don't want money to come between us. So join us. We'd love to see you. And yeah, thanks for being here. And thanks for, being a part of our little community. So yeah, anything else?
No, I mean, I hope that you all got a little bit out of this session. I know summer planning, as we mentioned before, can seem very far away, but hopefully the calendar of different events through the college admissions pass whets your appetite for all that's to come and helps you manage this process with like people who can like guide and answer questions. And I think sometimes just like having that kind of structure and like people who are in your corner, which hopefully we can be those people, as well as the many amazing guest speakers and other folks who are kind of coming in to give you a palate cleanser just between the two of us. But Tinkerbell might be on another webinar. Who knows? We'll see if we can book her. She's like really, she's flighty. So
nice. That was really good.
I saw the very good in the chat and I was very impressed by that. So
Thanks. All right.
So nice spending our morning with you.
There will be more puns in the year to come. Much love, and we'll see you next time. Bye.